All right, so let's dive into a separate piece, specifically Chapter 9. And we find ourselves at Devon School on like this really dreary winter day. Everything feels just bleak,
Mm.
except for our ever-optimistic main character, Phineas,
Hmm.
who's always got a plan to, lift everyone's spirits. Like he's come up with this plan for a winter carnival. We're going to be working with excerpts from the book to unpack what this carnival represents
Yeah.
and like how it plays into the bigger things of the story.
Yeah, what's really striking about this chapter is the way it juxtaposes this like lighthearted, almost whimsical atmosphere with this like undercurrent of tension
Yeah.
and impending change. It's like the calm before the storm, you
Oh, I
know?
see that. Yeah. You've got Phineas, who is like this whirlwind of energy. He's totally immune to the winter blues. He's impulsive.
Uh-huh.
He just buys this grand lion-headed chair just for the day.
Uh-huh.
And his insistence on a fire from Olympus to open the games ends up with him setting the Iliad on fire.
Oh.
Soaked in cider, of course.
It's hilarious. But it also speaks volumes about Phineas's character. He's just like this force of nature,
Yeah.
determined to create joy and escape, even as the world outside Devon is on the brink of war.
So tell me more about this carnival. It's not just any ordinary gathering, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. It's this carefully constructed world of escape, a separate piece, as the book calls it. They're in this little park by the Nagumset River, surrounded by all these snow statues and makeshift ski jumps. And they have this prize table that's overflowing with, well, let's just say items that capture the unique interests of teenage boys. A lock of hair from the town belle, Brinker's collection of Betty Grable photographs. It's this fascinating mix of the innocent and the, shall we say, aspirational.
It just sounds like organized chaos.
Yeah.
All orchestrated by Phineas,
Mm.
holding court in his lion-headed throne.
Exactly. And amidst this carefully curated mayhem, we see other characters grappling with their own feelings about the war and their place in the world. Brinker, for example, usually a stickler for rules. He finds himself torn between his desire for control and like this overwhelming need for escape. His attempts to impose order on the carnival almost become comical in the face of Phineas's infectious energy.
Yeah, do you think Brinker's struggle is a reflection of what a lot of the boys at Devon are feeling at this point?
I think so. This is a time when young men are facing the very real prospect of going off to war. The carnival, in a way,
Mhm.
becomes this microcosm of their internal conflict, this desire to hold on to innocence and joy while acknowledging the looming reality of adulthood and responsibility.
You mentioned that this chapter uses a lot of sensory details to create this feeling of both exhilaration and fragility. What are some examples that stand out to you?
Well, there's the smell of hard cider wafting through the air, the biting cold that makes you feel truly alive, the crunch of snow under foot. Knowles does such a brilliant job of immersing you in this world, making you feel the boy's desperate need for escape.
And then there's the decathlon, which is more than just a sporting event. It's Phineas creating this symbolic moment where you, the listener, are crowned the Olympic candidate. He places a wreath on your head, drawing you into this shared experience of pure, joyful escape.
This is a perfect example of Phineas's choreography of peace. He's not just organizing games, he's constructing a reality where war doesn't exist,
Yeah.
where athleticism and camaraderie are the ultimate ideals.
It's interesting because this choreography of peace is mentioned a lot in the book, but never explicitly defined. What do you think it means in this context?
I think it's about Phineas's ability to create these moments of beauty and harmony even in the face of darkness. It's his way of defying the encroaching reality of war, of holding on to a vision of a world where such things don't exist.
It's a beautiful concept, but also a fragile one. And that fragility is really driven home when Brownie Perkins arrives with a telegram, causing this sudden shift in mood.
It's like a record scratch. The telegram is this stark reminder that the real world, with all its complexities and harsh realities, can't be ignored forever.
And it turns out the telegram is a desperate plea for help from Leper, who has escaped from his military enlistment and is hiding at his Christmas location. To fully understand the weight of this, we need to talk a bit about Leper. He's not just another student at Devon. He's always been a bit of an outsider, an observer of life rather than a participant.
Exactly. He's fascinated by nature, by the patterns and rhythms of the natural world. His decision to enlist in the army, to willingly enter the world of war, it's almost jarring. It doesn't seem to fit with his personality at all.
And yet, there he is, reaching out for help, shattering the illusion of this self-contained world they've built at Devon. It puts Jean, and by extension the reader, in a difficult position.
It does. Do you remain in this carefully constructed haven of peace, or do you answer the call to help a friend in need? This is where the central tension of the chapter lies. the pull of personal happiness versus the demands of loyalty and duty.
It's a classic dilemma, isn't it? And it's made even more complex by the fact that earlier in the chapter, the boys, with the exception of Phineas, they kind of turn Leper into this mythical war hero.
That's right. They joke about Leper's liberation of Tunisia, Leper on the Burma Road. It's all very tongue-in-cheek, but there's this underlying anxiety they're trying to mask by creating this larger-than-life version of Leper.
It seems like by turning him into a mythical figure, they can maintain a safe distance from the war, keep it contained within the realm of fantasy. But with this telegram, that distance is shattered.
Absolutely. And it's telling that Phineas doesn't participate in this hero-making. He seems to intuitively understand the gravity of the situation, even before the telegram arrives. His reaction to the news is not one of amusement or disbelief, but a genuine shock and concern. It's like he recognizes the potential darkness lurking beneath the surface of Leper's plea.
Which is fascinating because up until this point, Phineas has been the driving force behind the carnival, this beacon of joy and optimism. To see him so shaken by the telegram speaks volumes about the power of this intrusion, this sudden collision of their separate peace with the harsh reality of the world outside.
Exactly. It's the end of innocence in a way, the intrusion of a reality that can no longer be ignored, no matter how elaborate the games they create. And for Gene, the telegram marks a turning point. He realizes he can't exist solely in Phineas's world of joyful escapism anymore.
It's like he's being forced to grow up, to confront the fact that the world is a complex and often painful place. And that final line from Leper's telegram, "My safety depends on you coming at once." It just hangs there, heavy with implication.
It's not just a request. It's a burden, a responsibility that Gene can't escape. And it sets the stage for what comes next, the consequences of this intrusion, the ripple effects of the war on this separate piece they've so carefully constructed. But before we move on to part 2, where we'll delve into that, I'm curious to hear what stood out to you about this part of the book. What resonated with you the most?
It's interesting how the telegram comes right in the middle of the decathlon. Like this moment of peak joy and celebration, it's almost like a cruel irony, this sudden intrusion of reality into their carefully crafted world of escape. And it makes me think back to how the boys, particularly Gene, dealt with Leper's absence before he enlisted. They joked about him, created these fantastical stories about his wartime exploits.
Right. It was a way to distance themselves from the reality of war, wouldn't you say? By turning Leper into this mythical figure, they could keep the conflict at arm's length, maintain the illusion that it wouldn't touch their lives.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. It's like they were trying to control the narrative, shape it into something more palatable, less threatening.
Exactly. And it's telling that Phineas, who is like the architect of their separate piece, doesn't participate in this hero-making. He seems to understand on some level the true cost of war, even if he doesn't articulate it directly.
That makes his reaction to the telegram even more poignant. He goes from this huge exuberance, this almost childlike joy, to a state of shock and concern. It's like he sees through the facade, recognizes the fragility of the world they've created.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking moment. And it really highlights the contrast between Phineas's worldview and the encroaching reality of the war. He's built this world based on joy, athleticism, and camaraderie. But the telegram is a stark reminder that those ideals are constantly under threat.
And it's not just Phineas who's affected. The telegram forces Gene to confront a whole new set of emotions and challenges. He's been so caught up in this separate piece, embracing the escape it offers. But now he has to reconcile that with the responsibility of helping a friend who's clearly in distress.
It's a classic coming-of-age dilemma, right? The pull of personal happiness versus the demands of loyalty and duty. And it raises questions about the nature of friendship, the sacrifices we're willing to make for those we care about.
I'm also struck by the language Leper uses in the telegram. He says, "My safety depends on you coming at once." It's not a casual request, it's a desperate plea, a statement that carries so much weight.
Absolutely. It's a burden that Gene just can't ignore, and it sets the stage for the next chapter, where we see the consequences of this intrusion, the way the war begins to unravel the fabric of their separate piece.
Do you think the telegram is a turning point in the novel? Does it mark the end of their innocence, the inevitable collapse of their carefully constructed world?
I think it's definitely a pivotal moment. It forces them to confront the reality they've been trying so hard to avoid. But whether it marks the complete end of their innocence, that's a question open to interpretation. I think there's still a part of Gene, and maybe even Phineas, that clings to the hope of preserving their separate piece, even as the world around them crumbles.
That's a fascinating point. It suggests that even in the face of tragedy and conflict, there's this enduring human desire for connection, for moments of joy and escape.
Precisely, and that's what makes this chapter so compelling. It doesn't offer easy answers or simple resolutions. It leaves us grappling with these complex questions about the nature of peace, the limits of escape, and the enduring power of friendship.
And what about the symbolism of the telegram itself? It's this tangible object that arrives from the outside world,
Correct.
disrupting their carefully constructed reality.
It's almost like a physical manifestation of the war, a reminder that even in their secluded world at Devon, they can't completely escape the reach of conflict. It's also interesting to note that the telegram arrives via Brownie Perkins, a character who represents the more conventional, rule-bound aspects of Devon. It's as if the forces of order and conformity are literally delivering the news of Leper's breakdown, further highlighting the tension between the world Phineas has created and the reality they're trying to escape.
That's a great observation. It adds another layer of complexity to the symbolism of the telegram and its impact on the characters. I'm also curious to get your thoughts on the setting of this scene. The carnival takes place in this small park by the Naguamset River, a location that's been described as both beautiful and somewhat isolated.
The setting definitely plays a significant role in shaping the atmosphere of the chapter. The park represents this liminal space, a place where the boys can temporarily escape the confines of Devon and create their own world. But it's also a place that's vulnerable to intrusion, as evidenced by the arrival of the telegram, the river itself, which has been a constant presence throughout the novel, takes on a new meaning in this context. It represents the flow of time, the inevitability of change, and the fact that even the most carefully constructed separate piece can be swept away by the currents of history.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The river becomes this powerful symbol of the forces beyond their control, the forces that will ultimately shape their destinies.
Exactly. And as we move forward, it's important to keep in mind that the telegram is just the beginning. It's a catalyst for a series of events that will test the boys' friendships, their loyalties, and their very sense of who they are in a world on the brink of war.
Speaking of testing friendships, the dynamics between Jean and Phineas are particularly interesting in this chapter. We see their separate piece begin to show cracks, not from external forces, but from their own internal conflicts.
Absolutely. The telegram acts as a kind of mirror, reflecting their individual anxieties and vulnerabilities. Phineas, despite his outward confidence, is deeply affected by the news of Leper's breakdown. It challenges his belief in the power of joy and athleticism to transcend the darkness of the world.
And Jean, who has always been more introspective and prone to self-doubt, is forced to confront his own capacity for loyalty and sacrifice. The question of whether he will go to Leper's aid becomes a test of his character, a defining moment in his journey towards self-discovery.
I think it's also important to note that the telegram doesn't just reveal the boys' vulnerabilities, it also highlights their strengths. Despite their initial shock and uncertainty, they both demonstrate a deep capacity for compassion and empathy. Phineas, even in his distress, expresses concern for Leper's well-being.
And Jean, despite his initial hesitation, ultimately decides to answer Leper's call for help. This decision, I think, speaks volumes about his growing sense of responsibility and his willingness to step outside his comfort zone for the sake of friendship.
I agree, and it sets the stage for the next phase of their journey, a journey that will take them beyond the confines of Devon and into a world where the boundaries between innocence and experience, joy and sorrow, become increasingly blurred.
Before we move on to part 3, where we'll explore the aftermath of the telegram and its lasting impact on the characters, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've discussed so far.
This telegram, it just feels like so much more than a message. It's almost like a symbol of this inevitable intrusion of the outside world into their carefully constructed haven at Devon. It makes me think about this whole idea of a separate piece, which is so central to the novel. Is it even possible to create a world completely separate from conflict and pain? That's a great question, and I think it's one that Knowles intentionally leaves open for the reader to grapple with. On one hand, you have Phineas, who embodies this almost childlike belief in the power of joy and camaraderie to overcome any obstacle. He creates this world at Devon where competition is friendly, where athleticism is celebrated, and where the ugliness of war feels miles away.
But then you have the reality of Leper's telegram, this stark reminder that the world outside Devon is a very different place. It's a world where innocence is shattered, where friendships are tested, and where even the strongest bonds can be strained by the pressures of conflict.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes this novel so powerful and enduring. It doesn't offer easy answers or simple solutions. It forces us to confront the complexities of human nature, the fragility of peace, and the enduring search for meaning and connection in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
Do you think Phineas's vision of a separate piece is ultimately naive? Or is there something valuable, even necessary, about striving to create moments of beauty and harmony even in the face of darkness?
I think there's a lot of value in striving for those moments, even if they're fleeting. You know, it's what makes us human in a way, our capacity for joy, for love, for connection, even in the midst of suffering. It's what gives our lives meaning. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that those moments can't last forever. The world is a complex place, and conflict is an inevitable part of the human experience.
So how do we reconcile these two seemingly contradictory impulses, the desire for peace and harmony and the reality of conflict and suffering?
I don't think there's a single answer to that question. It's something we all grapple with throughout our lives. But I think this novel suggests that it's about finding a balance, a way to hold on to hope and joy without ignoring the realities of the world around us.
That's such an important point. It's not about retreating into a fantasy world, but about finding ways to navigate the complexities of life with both courage and compassion. And it strikes me that this idea of balance is reflected in the way the novel ends. Without giving too much away for those who haven't read it, we see the characters grappling with the aftermath of the war, the losses they've suffered, and the ways they've been changed by their experiences.
Absolutely. And while the ending is bittersweet, it's also hopeful in its own way. It suggests that even in the face of tragedy, there's a possibility for growth, for healing, and for a kind of peace that comes from accepting the complexities of life.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think it speaks to the enduring power of this novel. It's a story that stays with you long after you've finished reading it, prompting you to reflect on your own life, your own relationships, and your own search for meaning and connection in a world that's constantly changing.
And that, I think, is the hallmark of truly great literature. It doesn't just tell a story. It sparks a conversation, a journey of self-discovery that continues long after the final page is turned.
Well said. And on that thought-provoking note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into a separate piece. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of Chapter 9 and the many layers of meaning it contains.
It's been a pleasure diving into this complex and thought-provoking novel with you.
And to all of you listening, we encourage you to continue exploring the themes and ideas we've discussed today. Pay attention to the ways they resonate in your own lives, in your own relationships, and in the world around you. Until next time, keep reading, keep thinking, and keep those aha moments coming.